All right, folks, updates on the SAVE Act. I'll get you all the details in a moment. Suffice it to say, who would think that the U.S. Senate would be so divided on an issue such a great majority of Americans agree on? Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Friends, welcome to the program. Great to be with you as always. My email, sam@whatsrightshow.com. That's where you can reach me. Of course, you can also find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, @whatsrightsam. That's my handle. Now, I had the opportunity yesterday, was on Lindell TV in the morning, early in the morning, just after I had finished recording the program, and was on with Vanessa Broussard, great program, and we were talking about, of course, this DHS shutdown. The Department of Homeland Security is not funded right now. The Democrats continue to dig their heels in, and what is the concession that they want? This is because this ties into the SAVE Act. The Democrats, the concession that they want is they want Trump, they want the administration, they want Republicans to agree to limits on ICE, prevent ICE officers from operating specifically at polling places. That's the restriction. Now, when you combine that with all of these no votes that the Democrats just put on the record for voter ID, you really begin to wonder what's afoot. And you link all this up, and clearly, you got a problem, and it does not make the Dems look particularly good. So here's what happened yesterday afternoon. The Senate voted 51-48 to begin debate on the SAVE Act. Okay, this is the very first procedural hurdle required. Lisa Murkowski is the only Republican to vote against it. Murkowski is the rhino from Alaska. Not surprising. Tom Tillis, who is retiring, he's on his way out. He's a rhino from North Carolina. He did not even show up to vote. And the Democrats are all unified in opposition. Okay, so right now, the problem is they'll need 60 votes to pass it, and they don't have it. Now, Thune has said openly he doesn't have the votes, and he's refused a nuclear option. The nuclear option is doing away with the 60-vote threshold for the filibuster. So what we're headed toward is a marathon debate, and we're going to get some theater on this. Okay, you're gonna hear some long speeches, and it's Cornyn flipped, right? Cornyn decided he was going to support this. I mean, he's got really no other option. He's fighting for his political survival in Texas. So there you go. So I mean, they'll be back on. I think, what is it? They're going to be back. I mean, tomorrow, presumably, they'll start working on this. All right, so we'll see. Now, I know there are different ways, and I've mentioned this before. There are different ways that this could get across the finish line. The nuclear option, just mentioned that. 60 votes, it's not going to happen. No chance. It would require 9 Democrats at this point to cross over. That's impossible. Reconciliation is another way it could happen, but probably not for a bill like this. It would apply only for a budget bill. And then Trump, I guess, could get in there and strong arm the Republicans. At that point, probably would do more harm than good. So we'll follow this. I'm just telling you, it's astounding that at the very moment that Democrats are telling Trump to stay away from polling places with ICE and are literally holding up money for the TSA and for the Department of Homeland Security, not just during a busy travel time, but also in a period right now where we have a heightened terror threats facing the homeland. Democrats are doing this, and any Republican right now that gives this quarter is politically dead to me. Now, the big story today that I got to roll my sleeves up on this. Another day, another MAGA controversy, more intra-movement squabbling. God, you'd think we'd get a rest from this one day, for goodness sake. Joe Kent. Now, this guy, to be honest, was not largely on my radar, nor was he for producer Robbie. The name has been out there. He's a known guy in DC. He's not a major player, a major figure. Nonetheless, his story has been thrust into the spotlight by virtue of a strongly worded letter of resignation from his position. Now, he was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, and he put out a letter resigning his position. He made the letter public, and the sum total of the letter was that he could not, in good conscience, using his words, support the ongoing war in Iran. He wrote that Iran posed no imminent threat to the U.S., and that we started this war due to, and this is the part that was particularly inflammatory, due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. All right. There were, there's other parts of this that raised eyebrows. For example, here he wrote up somewhere bottom half of this, quote, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. And he went on to write that this was the same tactic that Israel used to get us into the Iraq war. And he then talked about his combat history. He had been deployed 11 times. And as a Gold Star husband, he lost his wife. Shannon is her name. And he called it a war manufactured by Israel. I look, let me tell you, first off, I read this letter. And without knowing any of the background, to me, it was such a it was disappointing. Yeah, this doesn't even begin to cover it. What is this? Well, I really hope, I'm going to tell you this, folks. Big picture here. I hope that Trump is pursuing this action against Iran on more than just vibes. And the thing is that I trust Trump enough to say to you with a fair degree of certainty that that we are not pursuing this type of action, this type of war, simply on the basis of being influenced in a media disinformation campaign. We have information. You think that perhaps, just maybe, there wasn't real intel involved? Okay, and so we'll just put that one off to the side a minute. I've heard a number of people say that this guy actually, in the lead up to his to his resignation, had been caught leaking, or at least that he'd been suspected of leaking, and that he was sidelined from his, from reviewing sensitive, confidential, classified information. So there's some of that going on, and I've heard it said a few different places. I'm pointing that out. Number one, we don't even know all the intel that he had, and at what point he actually was stopped, being functionally in his post. Now, this idea. Iran posed no imminent threat to the U.S. Neither did ISIS. But the funny thing is, this guy supported that and even applauded Trump defeating them in the letter. He wrote this another part. I support the values and the foreign policies you campaigned on in 2016, 2020, and 2024. Well, guys, I keep telling you this, and I keep playing the tapes. There is a long established record of Trump talking about stopping Iran from getting a nuclear weapon, and these remarks precede 2016 even. They, I believe, are well in advance of any time when Trump was seriously considering a run for the presidency. And as soon as Trump becomes president in 2017 and he begins to receive intel, those beliefs are well, they're amplified. I mean, he's if anything, he becomes more staunchly fixated on the idea. So this same Kent guy that basically tells Trump that he got bamboozled by the Israelis writes in the letter itself, quote, "In your first administration, you understood better than any modern president how to decisively apply military power without getting us drawn into never-ending wars." Okay. Well, what's this? I think it's a little too soon to say that we're getting drawn into a never-ending conflict. That's just my opinion. And, you know, I mean, come on, what is this now? March 18th? So we are, 19 days into this, and we're already calling it a quagmire? Why not give Trump the benefit of the doubt here? The ISIS campaign took 2 years. And yet he, in that very line about talking about never-ending wars, said Trump demonstrated this by killing Soleimani and by, and it's a direct quote, defeating ISIS. What the hell? I guess as long as it doesn't take longer than 2 years, we should be fine. Oh, well, this echo chamber. Trump has 6 years of experience being president. And he is, I think, very suspicious of the intelligence communities. And also, I think he's periodically demonstrated that he is perfectly fine putting Netanyahu and the Israelis in their place. There were several times during the Gaza war where he was trying to get a peace deal done, and he literally barked at Netanyahu. There are a number of witnesses in the White House, in the Oval Office, who attested to this. Suggesting that Trump somehow fell victim to an external influence campaign, that, he was watching cable news and decided he was going to, Mark Levin, he was influenced by the great one himself. This whole thing is absurd. And then what is this business of the Israelis getting us into the war? I mean, Netanyahu, by the way, gave supportive testimony back then in Congress. He was a private citizen. And he did it only after the decision was already made. And we can debate I'm happy to. In fact, I have certainly my regrets about Iraq. But I don't see anything like that at all. And Sharon, who was in charge of Israel as a prime minister at the time in Israel, was actually against the Iraq war. This anti-Israel business is complete brain rot. Now, the guy is, I want to talk about the wife thing for a minute. You want my working theory on this? I'll give you, this is my working theory on this is, it comes from my experience as a 45-year-old man who's been married for 20 years. Now, what do I mean by this? This Kent guy who wrote this letter, you look at pictures of him, right? I did this. I did a deep dive on him yesterday as all this stuff was breaking. And he actually his appearance has changed. Now, he went through a tragedy, right? His first wife was killed in a terrorist bomb, and she was on assignment. And this obviously is an enormous tragedy, right? And she was actually killed by ISIS in Syria. and she was with the U.S. Navy. She was a technician, okay, secretive unit in the military. And on January 16th, 2019, in Syria, a suicide bomber detonated outside a restaurant, and she and other Americans were killed there. Now, he then gets remarried. That happens in 2019. He gets remarried in 2023, this Kent guy. And my observation here, just as a middle-aged guy, is I'm looking at him changing his look. I don't know if you notice this, Robbie, but like he does look, he has a completely different look today than he did 10 years ago. Now, I get it. We evolve. But here's the other thing. His new wife is a complete and total liberal. All right? The second wife, listen, she writes for the Gray Zone. She's this is Max Blumenthal. Blumenthal is a very liberal writer, okay? He's very anti-Israel, pro-authoritarian. He's written some well, his scholarship is very interesting, the stuff that he's put out there. Now, you know, I've had friends, and some of you will no doubt have had similar experiences, who divorce, okay, and remarry, and they change under the influence of the new person that's in their life, the new woman in their life, particularly men. You know, I don't know if it would happen to me, but I've had friends in my life that have completely changed who they are under the spell of a woman. In fact, Robbie and I, Robbie may know who I'm talking about here, but we once upon a time had a very conservative, both culturally and politically, friend who started dating a new, young, hot piece of money. And next thing you know, she and her were going to BLM rallies. And Robbie, you're laughing. You know exactly who I'm talking about. But he's hardly alone in this. Men start to do weird things when they find that second love in their life, or third or fourth, in some cases, and they adapt and they change. And so I'm telling you, this guy is under the spell of the woman. This is my theory. This is the Sam theory on this. And this whole resignation letter seems like it was written by the new wife. Well, Heather Kaiser was her name. Heather Kent is her name now. So this is the story, and it's blown everything wide open. Everybody now is up in arms about this. More conversations and hand wringing about is Trump doing the right thing? Is this America first? At the worst possible time, of course, the media seizing on this, but nobody's looking beyond, beyond sort of the immediate headline here. And so I don't look. The challenging thing is that when someone who sees the intel, and I don't know when he stopped seeing the intel, but a person that sees the classified information says, I believe that we are doing the wrong thing and that there was no justification for going into the war. There's Trump can declassify things unilaterally as president, but everybody else can't. And there's no way to defend against it, right? Because the only way to defend against it was, well, no, the intel actually says X and not Y, as you claim. And you can't do that because then you'd be revealing classified information. And Trump isn't going to reveal anything either because we're in the middle of a war. And what kind of a stupid idiot would start to divulge, classified information? So this is, to me, and his voting history. I didn't get into that. He voted for, he had a whole history. He voted for Bernie. He was a Democrat, a Republican. In 19, I think he was a Bernie supporter. I'll look into this here during the break. I'll be right back, folks. I want to make sure I give you the exact right information on this, but just a weirdo, if you ask me. Sam Mirejovsky here on the What's Right Media Network, the What's Right Show, brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law, because you deserve what's right.
The Sam and Ash team, they wanted me to have the best care. They had my interests at heart. I have an enormous amount of gratitude. I cannot say enough thank you.
I've got Kent's voting history right here. I've got it, and let me tell you, it's not pretty. Sam Mirejovsky here behind the What's Right microphone. Greetings, friends. Welcome to the program. So he voted. This is the guy who wrote the resignation letter, who has literally caught the internet on fire. Everybody talking about this because, of course, in the resignation letter, he thinks that we should not be at war with Iran. We should not be pursuing the action that the president is taking, and that the president is doing all of this under the spell of the Israel lobby. Just wild stuff. Of course, this guy's remarried to a liberal reporter, and it seems like something that she probably helped him draft. Nonetheless, his evolving views in the year 2000 and 2004, he voted for Bush, just like me. Then he registered as a libertarian for the 2012 election. All right, so in 2012, he voted for a libertarian candidate, and I don't see what he did in 2008. That's not on my radar. By 2019, he registered as a Democrat in Portland. Now, what else happened in 2019, Robbie? Well, he got married to the liberal chick, right? And my Sam's theorem on this is that men, very conservative men, you never see conservative men who are with where it works with liberal women. You just don't. It doesn't work. It never works. It just doesn't. So anyway, this guy got his head turned around by this new hot babe. They get married. He registers as a Democrat in Portland, votes for Bernie in the 2020 Democratic primary. Kent calls this a very tactical thing. Then he switches to run for Congress as a Republican. He does that twice. So he goes from, Republican to libertarian to Democrat, Bernie voter, now MAGA Republican. This guy's all over the map. I mean, I don't know. I always check in on this stuff, and I think to myself, hey, what would I do? What have I done? In a presidential election, you know how many times I've literally pinched my nose, walked into the voting booth, and voted for John McCain? Okay? For Mitt Romney? Give me a break. I don't know. And I guess my bigger question is why did Trump let this guy in? Now the fact is he's a respected, a respected operator in the military. And he had some good bona fides. But this guy, to me, seems like a snake. By the way, here's what Trump said about it, White House, yesterday, when asked during his meeting with the ambassador from Ireland, there for St. Paddy's Day, asked about this guy, and this is what Trump said.
Your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that presidents should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon.
Well, right? So, and of course, people out there saying, well, Trump, if you didn't think he was great on national security, why put him in this position? Look, I always say that you're staffing an administration and you're filling thousands of positions, and you have to do so in 4 months, 3 months. It's not every person that you put in every job is going to be absolutely perfect. I mean, that's a fact. So at any rate, well, he then gets into Trump also got into the subject of the intel and the war itself and the justification for
We
it.
didn't do the attack. Or if I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there loaded with cash? Hundreds of millions of dollars. You would have been very happy. This was a wonderful, they said hundreds of millions. People forget that. Does anybody remember? Right? You remember. Hundreds of millions of dollars in a Boeing 757. I think they had two of them loaded. They took the seats out and they put cash. And it was so much that there wasn't a bank in Virginia, Maryland, or D.C. that had any money left. They stripped them of all their money, put it into place, sent it to Iran, almost as ransom. That's not going to happen with Trump.
Now, do you know why I'm playing this clip and why I think this clip is important? Because what sounds like a random Trump tangent is a lot more. It's a reminder of how Trump talked about this payola money that was sent to the Iranians and how literally everybody, including some very established, learned people with intel community ties, all poo-pooed it. And you remember this because it happened. And Trump said, yep, they've sent over pallets of cash and da-da-da. And he got ridiculed. And everybody piled on. And then it turned out that Trump was right. And here's all I can tell you, folks. Now, some of you, I understand, are afflicted with, some low-grade TDS. And so whatever Trump does, you're going to have that visceral negative reaction to it. But just, if you can suspend that for a minute and hear me out on this, Trump has a long history about going with something, doing something decisively, whether it's action or words, and later be proven right. And so at less than 3 weeks in on this, I'm willing at this stage, when it comes to Iran, to give Trump the benefit of the doubt. I'm just willing to do it. And if this gamble turns out to be wrong, it's devastating. I admit. And how would I feel? My son's 18. Okay, fine. We can have that conversation. I can tell you. And Robbie, I actually haven't had this conversation with you, and maybe now is not the time to have it here with everybody listening. But I've thought at many times as my son was getting older and thinking about college, I've thought about a military school or academy or suggesting that he go that route, go into the military. Under Biden, I absolutely was dead set against it. I went from being open to the idea of my son serving to absolutely hell no. HE double hockey sticks, forget it. And when Hegseth came in, and this is, I'm just being candid. When Hegseth came in, my reaction to it was, okay, like this is a military. What I'm seeing here, this is a military that I'd be proud to have Daniel serve in. And I can tell you right now, today, the 18th of March, I don't feel any differently. And I know that's easy to say with him not being in the military and not being in harm's way. And I know that our soldiers have died and will die. But I still have faith that Trump is executing this because it needs to happen. And what I love about Trump is that he's not the kind of leader to get hung up on political correctness and convention. and he's willing to take a risk and a gamble. But when you look at the way other actions by this president have been done, military actions have been executed, Trump does wait. He waits, and he waits for the right window. And he waits sometimes when he got naysayers in his ear telling him to do something, and he holds out. So if he pressed the trigger on this, I still feel good about it. Now, well, what's the update? The update. Look, first of all, when it comes to the war itself, there have been Larijani, apparently the Iran security chief, was taken out. This happened was confirmed sometime yesterday. Valuable intel came from the Israelis and also from residents of Tehran. So people snitched on this guy. He is absolutely hated. And again, true to form, I saw a bunch of liberals, Robbie, on X, and there's an article in the New York Times about how Larijani was one of like the reasonable guys, and that Trump is taking out the reasonable people in the Iranian hierarchy, and that by taking out the reasonable people, it's actually an embodiment of the failure that Trump's execution is here of whatever this plan is. And it's almost, you have to go and read what this guy did and how many hundreds of thousands of people he's responsible for killing and incarcerating. This guy's a piece of work. And yeah, well, of course, the New York Times thinks he was a reasonable guy. But the real story about this Larijani killing is that they're getting intel now from inside the country. The other big development on Iran is that a couple of embassies I read, including the one in Copenhagen, have raised the Shah's flag. So there are starting to be diplomatic. People are bailing on the regime. Yeah, some of these Iranian ambassadors and other people in the services are beginning to defect. So the Austria embassy, Copenhagen, in Vienna, Copenhagen, Denmark, are two of the embassies that I alluded to. Meanwhile, in Canada, okay, Canada's welcoming a bunch of fleeing top Iranian clerics. So the new Iran will be will be in Montreal, or will be in Ontario, Canada, just to the north of us. Yay. Friends, I did a response. I had to do it. Katie Miller, Stephen Miller's wife, she's got a podcast. She does a lot of great commentary. I like her a lot. And that's why it broke my heart. I had to respond to her yesterday on X, and it sparked a little bit of a conversation. Well, Katie Miller, okay, talked about. She said, "Let me read the tweet. I'll pull up the tweet. Here we go. Okay, trial attorneys. Again, this is Katie Miller. This is not me. Trial attorneys are the biggest scam. They pay plaintiffs to sue. They take 90% of the verdict and are often funded by private equity. Trial attorneys make more than $50 billion a year just from fees." And then she says that this was a public relations play. Don't trust trial. And the article that she was forwarding on here was about how some trial attorneys in California are trying to push bills to rein in bad actors and things like that because they're fighting off Uber and the like. Now, oh boy, this is where I had to come in on this. And my response to her was look, first of all, I'm a conservative trial lawyer. And I wrote, I said, look, I think the point that you didn't make, that I fundamentally agree with, is that virtually all of my competitors are rabid, foaming at the mouth Democrats who give liberally to liberal causes. And that I get why people like you and frankly me don't like this cabal. I really do not like a lot of these people. It's why I avoid generally these lawyer conferences like the plague. But everybody, and this is I talk about this a lot when it comes to Sam and Ash, my day job. Everybody hates lawyers until they need one. That's true. And I can tell you my experience as a trial lawyer, as a conservative trial lawyer, is that I've, represented a lot of good Americans who were sincerely and legitimately injured and had no hopes of getting what's right and what they deserve without my help. And that's not to puff myself up. It's just to establish the necessity for what I do, for my services. And my problem with tort reform when it comes to, tort reform, right, pushed largely by conservatives, by people on my side of the aisle. So what's the solution for people if you legislate away their right to sue? If you put in tort reform? Who protects people when they suffer legitimate abuses? And what does an ordinary person of ordinary means do when they're fighting a multi-billion-dollar woke company? I mean, think about it. If State Farm refuses to pay your insurance claim, how are you supposed to, as an individual, pay out of pocket for a trial lawyer to fight a company that is worth billions of dollars and has, $3,000 an hour lawyers on retainer and can pay them, indefinitely? You have no hope or prayer going up against them. And what tort reform is, I think a lot of people don't realize, is tort reform is, they don't take away your right to sue. You can hire a lawyer, but they limit what lawyers can make. They limit the percentage of fees. And, I would say that's very, by the way, it's like price fixing, number one, not a very conservative position. What your lawyer charges and what you accept as their fee is between the two of you. The government has nothing to do with it. But also, if you had a choice of paying a lawyer $1,000 an hour up front or paying him 40% at the end of the case, only if you win, it's a no-brainer. And what a lot of people on our side of the aisle want to do is get in the middle of that and change that and legislate that away. I think that's fundamentally wrong. And the other thing that just absolutely irks me is, so if you take this away and if you make it impossible for ordinary people to go up against these big woke corporations, then they're just left to do what? To go and file a complaint with a multi-billion-dollar, public agency, a government-run consumer protection agency. I practice out in California. California has a very expensive state department of insurance. And one of the jobs of the insurance commissioner in California is to protect Californians from getting abused by insurance companies. Now, what do you think in practice that consists of? I mean, I know I have some insights. It's my job. They don't do anything. They just take tax money. And they sit around, they'll collect your complaint, and they'll go, okay, insurance company, is this true? No, it's not true. Okay, over. And so it goes. And what I would tell you folks is understand that in the 7th Amendment, in the Bill of Rights, it gives you the right, our founders believed that you had a right to sue civilly for damages that exceeded $20. Now, whatever that amount adjusted for inflation is today, you have that constitutional right. And I would submit to you that the smallest form of government in our country is the 12 people on a jury. And I would much rather have a system that holds companies accountable privately, that's self-funded, that operates through the courts than turn it over to a vast, unrestricted government blob bureaucracy. And that somehow seems to be what some conservatives out there want to do. So when I hear tort reform, I actually think, this is price fixing by conservatives. They need to stay the hell out of this. Just think. I mean, a lot of the lawyers that are suing now on behalf of January 6th people are doing it on contingency fee. These people got reamed by the feds under Biden. You think they've got money now to go pay a lawyer out of pocket to go prosecute a years-long case against the federal government? Yeah, dream on. Okay, I am setting the record straight here, as per usual on the What's Right show. Friends, this hour of the program brought to you by Sam and Ash Injury Law, the only law firm to trust for your injury case. Sam Mirejovsky here, Sam at what'srightshow.com, at What's Right Sam on X. Find the show wherever you get your podcast. What's Right Show, that's the name.